Hello, it is I, the HumpBackDiver, the land-dwelling diver, and today I wanted to start an art series based on the game Dead by Daylight. I haven't played Dead by Daylight for a very long time. I've only been around about 2 weeks before Alien was announced. But in that short time, I've grown very fond of the game. I love how it's become sort of like a hall of fame for horror, with a bunch of legendary horror characters. And it even got me to watch some of these characters' original medias. They are also coming out with my Dream chapter this summer, so I'm pretty hyped. And with the hype, I wanted to do an art series based on the portraits of its killers. I was inspired by a video from Asimov's where he ranked the killers' in-game portraits. In the video, he described how his favorite portraits were those that showed the killer's personality and or power. And then I thought to myself, hey, what if all these killers had portraits that showed off their abilities? So that's what I plan to do for today. Now, for this series, I have a couple of rules for myself. Rule number 1, these have to be in portrait form, no landscapes. Rule number 2, try to show off the powers of the killers clearly in the portrait. And for my third and final rule, I can only use what abilities the killers have in Dead by Daylight for the portraits rather than from their original media. Yeah, I did this final rule mostly for the licensed killers, since a lot of them show incredible feats in their original media, but are mostly absent in Dead by Daylight. So I'm only gonna go with what abilities they were given in Dead by Daylight. Okay, now that you got the gist for this series, let us begin, shall we? Yeah, I know. Trapper, or his real name, Evan, is a bit basic to start off this series, but he is Dead by Daylight's first official killer, and the poster boy for the game, so I only thought it right to start off this series with him. But anyway, coming up with a portrait idea for the Trapper wasn't hard at all because Trapper is, a one-trick pony. And as his name suggests, his main power in the game is placing down traps, which trap survivors. And that's kind of it. So yeah, as I said, coming up with a portrait idea for him was really easy. So I start off the portrait by making the mask of the Trapper, which is a common thing I do in all of my art where I always start drawing a character by the head because at least to me the most important part of drawing a character is either the face or the head, and without it I cannot really finish the drawing. But after getting the mask right, I started drawing his little trap, which is not a generic bear trap, it's actually a specific one, but I don't know what it's called. But drawing that was kind of a pain in the ass, I'm not gonna lie. This was also my first time ever drawing a bear trap, which only made it a bit harder, but I eventually got it right and started to draw the rest of the Trapper, his body, which I specifically wanted to get the pose where he's like setting up his traps, which is a pose I've never done before, so that was also really tricky to get right. But even though it does look a bit wonky and I made him a lot more buff than I wanted to, I'm still really proud that I managed to get the body shape that I wanted. So it was actually really great practice for me and for future portraits, I imagine, and or other drawings I have in the future. I also hated having to erase some of the bear trap to fit his hand. I originally wanted to show the entire bear trap, but he doesn't really set it up without having to grab it, so, sacrifices had to be made. It seems obvious that you have to grab the bear trap to, set it up, but it still hurt having to erase all of that bear trap progress for the hand, but whatever. But I really did like having to color the Trapper, especially finding the right spots to put his blood splatters, and of course looking at official models of him. I used this dry paint brush to give him this dirty textured look, which now looking back on it isn't my favorite, and I kind of wished I paired it up with other brushes to give it more of a textured and nicer look. But anyways, something you'll notice too is that this portrait is the only one where I really gave him a floor or background, which was kind of necessary to emphasize him placing down a trap near grass, which is the optimal way of using Trapper. But anyways, with that, the portrait is now complete. The Nemesis, a BOW made by the Umbrella Corporation to hunt down and eliminate STARS members during the dying hours of Raccoon City. Easily towers and overpowers any human it comes across. The Nemesis possesses way more intelligence than other tyrants and its undead peers as well. And this is shown as it's able to use multiple weapons to get the job done, such as a rocket launcher, a flamethrower, or even tentacles from its own body to drag its targets in closer. He'll burst through walls and kill anyone that gets in the way of its mission. Also, good luck landing any hits on him. He literally dodges rockets point blank. And even if you do land a hit, damaging the Nemesis will do nothing but cause it to mutate, making it even harder to both fight and survive against it. Got all that? Good. Now forget all of it because Behavior did none of that. All Nemesis has in Dead by Daylight is a simple tentacle attack and an occasional NPC zombie that walks around and almost does nothing. Now, despite not being a very good representation of Nemesis, I still really do love him and he actually is my main in the game. And it's also not like they took everything away from him, since he still has some aspects of him from the games, such as his height. Because Nemesis in RE3 is a really tall boy, and in Dead by Daylight it is no different since he is the tallest killer by default. And they also kept that wall breaking aspect of him since he is the best pallet breaker in the game, which is the survivor's only means of defense against the killers. And the zombies can roam around the map, finding survivors at generators and slowing down their progress even more. So once I boiled down everything I wanted to show on the portrait, I set to work on it. And I'm really mad since the time-lapse didn't record any of the coloring process, which really bummed me out. Because fun fact, this is the first one I actually drew and was sort of like a test to see if I could do my ideas justice. But anyway, I started off by doing the face of the Nemesis, but I couldn't quite get it right on the first try. So I decided to not stress myself out about it and start doing another aspect of the drawing I really wanted to do, which was the palette, which was actually really fun to make. But it kinda sucks since I had to cut it in half eventually. But now with the palette in place and doing a sketch of the Nemesis's face on my sketchbook, I could actually start doing the portrait. Getting his tentacle right was a bit of an issue, but I eventually found the shape I wanted, and then set to work on making the rest of his body, which I am not the best at making buff body types, but I am proud of what I came up with. After making the outline of the Nemesis, I set to work on working on his little zombie friends, which to me were the most important part of the portrait because I wanted to portray a zombie apocalypse, sort of like what Resident Evil's games are all about, you know, infections, zombies, and stuff like that. So I wanted the portrait to be somewhat overwhelming, like this greater force has taken down your defenses and is now overrunning you with his horde. Now, none of the coloring process recorded, as I said earlier, but getting the infection on his tentacle was kind of difficult. Finding the right brush for it was definitely the hardest part of it, but after I did that, everything was smooth sailing from there, to be honest. Also, please don't kill me, but I forgot to include the little bubbles that boil up whenever Nemesis upgrades his tentacle, so that's an artistic issue on my part. That is my bad. But with that, the portrait is now complete. Alright, so next up we have the Clown, which I'm even surprised he's considered a killer since I don't imagine he'd be the most in shape of the killers, but I guess that's what the entity's magic does to you, right? But anyway, this fat bastard's power involves bottles, at which he throws at you, and I'm not really sure what's in them, but one slows you down and the other speeds you up. It's pretty simple. So his portrait was also really simple to come up with. Alright, so just like my other portraits, I started off this one with the head, which was actually pretty fun to make, I'm not gonna lie, because he's got like such a fat face that so I just got to draw like a bunch of curves for his face, basically. But after I got the face done, I started to do the makeup on him because because, fun fact, this was the first one I actually started to color, so this was more of me, like, experimenting, trying to see which brushes would not only work for this portrait, but for the rest of them, basically. And it took a while, a good while, actually, to find even, like, a brush that would even work for his makeup. But, I found it, and the rest of them that I used for the other portraits, so this is a great learning experience for me. I don't know if you guys saw it, but the sketch I made of the clown on my sketchbook wasn't really satisfied with the smile, so I decided to look up some pictures of, like, weird, creepy smiles, and I landed on the design you see on screen now. But after that, I decided to get some work done on his weapon and his bottles. Then after those were done, I started to work on the rest of his outfit. And the coloring process was kind of a pain because he had so many different little colors I had to use, and trying to get them to all balance each other out was also really not fun. But after the coloring was done, I got to add in some like groggy, dirty stains, and that was actually pretty fun to do. But then I knew that I wanted the background to be his little bottles, whatever fumes come out of them. And then after that, it was just, looking over the portrait, seeing if I missed any little details and whatnot. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not very proud of how it came out. I kind of wished I emphasized his bottles a lot more into it. But I think it came out serviceable, and I don't know, I might rework this one in the future. But anyways, the portrait is now done. Dracula, the Dark Lord. That's about all I know about Dracula. Yeah, I've never played any of the 29 games or watched the anime. In fact, my only real knowledge of Castlevania comes from whatever was in Smash Ultimate. Now, even though I don't really know anything about Castlevania, I still really find him to be like a really cool killer. Vampires are some of my favorite mythical beings, and that's exactly what he is. Plus, he's able to go furry mode, like, who doesn't like that? Being able to not only transform as a wolf, but also transform as a bat. He's also able to use these pillars of flame in his normal vampire form, but at least to me, the wolf and bat transformations are a lot more memorable than the pillars of flame. So for his portrait, I specifically wanted to try to focus on not only his normal form, but also his bat and wolf form as well. So even though I don't really care for Castlevania, I still wanted to do him justice on the portrait here, so I took around a day and a half to get his face right on my sketchbook, and I eventually did. I even like how his beard kind of came out like a little bat, One challenge about drawing Dracula is that since I don't really know what game this particular Dracula comes from, I didn't know what specific Dracula clothing to look up, so I just had to go off of like very poor images at the time of Dracula in Dead by Daylight. So his outfit probably isn't going to be as good as it could have been if I actually had good looking images at the time. But as I said earlier, I didn't really add the Hellfire, since to me that's not the most memorable part of his kit in Dead by Daylight. So I simply replaced it with his little wine glass that he does in his Mori, and drinks the blood of the survivor. But after I finished Dracula, I set to work on working on his wolf and bat forms. And while I got the wolf done in like under a day, the bat was a whole different story. I don't know if this time lapse will show it, but it took me around 3 days to get the face of the bat right, because bats have very weird faces. But the bat was completed, and then after that was just having to do the coloring for the portrait. And one thing about the coloring is that I know Dracula's eyes glow yellow in game, but the wolf in bat form's eyes glow red when you're in them, so I just decided to make Dracula's eyes glow red to keep consistency with both his forms. Once everything was colored, I just had to finish the smoke effect whenever he like transforms. And funny story, I finished it, but I had a friend tell me that it looked like snow, so I had to go back and make it a lot more smoke-like. But that was like a little fun little rework of the smoke effect. Oh yeah, one more thing. I know Dracula doesn't really show fangs like a typical vampire, but I just wanted to emphasize that he was one in the portrait, so I just gave him little fangs. But yeah, with that, the portrait is now complete.
Good work. Extra chum for you after.
So, funny story. I was originally gonna end this video off with Dracula and release this video back in October, somewhere during Halloween, since at that time Dracula was the newest killer added to Dead by Daylight. But I had most of my time taken up by college, so I had to unfortunately shelf the video for a while. And it took up so much of my time that they've already released a new killer. As of the time of me making this video, the Houndmaster is currently the newest killer to Dead by Daylight. And normally I probably wouldn't have gone out of my way to make a new portrait for her, especially since the other 4 were made about 2 months before I made this one. But both her lore and her gameplay are really fun. So I really wanted to go and make a portrait for her. Plus, she has a dog. Who doesn't like that? Speaking about the dog is, of course, her main power. Being able to go send your dog out to generators to search for survivors, or having it catch survivors mid-chase. And while the search power is pretty neat, I would say her most memorable part is the dog catching you. So that's what I wanted to emphasize in her portrait. So I start off the Houndmaster by, of course, drawing both her and her dog's heads. And I also colored in part of her face, since she has this weird damaged patch of skin on the left side of her head, which is never really explained in the lore, so I'm assuming that's just something the entity did to help her control Snug whenever she needs him to redirect. You also might notice that the time-lapse kind of like flashes black and white. That was just me having fun with the glowing eyes. I really love doing the glowing effect for the eyes. But I also did that so Snug could stand out from Dracula's wolf form, which was the last one I did. But anyways, doing the outfit for the Houndmaster was pretty difficult since I ran into the same issue I did with Dracula, where she's so new, there's not really good pictures of her at the time for me to really get like a good look at her outfit. Seriously, I had to look through like 12 pictures just to get the outfit right. It was not fun, but I did it, and I'm pretty happy with how it came out. I wanted this portrait to be more like a first-person perspective, like the person in the portrait is being dragged closer to Portia, which is the Houndmaster's real name. And I did that by Snug grabbing a random hand, which is supposed to be the perspective of the survivor being dragged to the Houndmaster. And I actually have a lot more killers planned in the future that will have this first-person perspective type of portrait. I also wanted to give her a wicked smile, since both in lore and in game she's constantly like laughing about the suffering of her victims. And I originally didn't really like the smile I came up with, but it grew on me over time. And now her Mori, she also smiles evilly, so you know, it was perfect, basically. There's not much for me to say on the coloring process, since it was just fine. I didn't really go through any complications while doing it. But with that, the portrait is now complete. Before I end off the video, I just want to give a massive shout out to my friend George, who helped me get the in-game footage, even screen recording the segments for the Nemesis, Dracula, and Houndmaster. He has a channel where we react to animated pilots or random things from the internet, so please go check him out. Making these portraits, while time consuming, was really fun, and I am definitely going to be making more in the future. I've still got 32 more killers to go, and if any of you guys have a specific killer you want me to do, let me know down below in the comment section. Also, if you want to see more things from me, I also have an Instagram and a Blue Sky account. And with that, I'll see you next time.